finally doing a book video. Today's video is going to be the 5 reads that I would recommend for the spooky fall season and then what I have coming up next. As much as we love a summer read, I just feel like the fall is the perfect time to like cozy up with a book. Granted, most of these books do keep me on the edge of my seat, so I may look cozy, but they are just like so twisty and turny. So let's kick it off. The first book that I wanted to recommend is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This is the first book that I've ever read from this author, so I really didn't know what to expect from it. And I will say, I was blown away. I have never been more confused reading a book, which could be a good thing and a bad thing. The author goes into the husband's perspective and the wife's perspective and other people in the book. It goes from first person to third person, like it bounces around a lot. I found that this was really cool because I haven't really read a novel that is like that still ends up making sense. The book starts out with Mr. and Mrs. Wright, which is kind of a cool oxymoron because everything goes wrong in the book. They win a trip to go out to this like cozy stay out in this like snowy atmosphere. When they show up, it is an old church. It's so creepy and eerie. The power doesn't work well. They keep seeing weird things. Like everything about it is not what they expected. It's basically a haunted house. That really made the setting of this book pretty creepy. Another element that led to this book being a very easy read is that each of the chapters were very short and they ended with foreshadowing and like keeping you guessing. So I would rate this book a 4 out of 5. I think it couldn't quite be out of 5 because some of the things were a little bit of a stretch and that confusion did get to be a lot at times, but it was a solid 4 out of 5. The second book that I want to recommend is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I like this author and I've heard a lot about this book, so I did have high expectations going into it and it lived up to them, which is always a satisfying feeling. This book is set in a beautiful apartment building in Paris and each of the tenants owns their own floor. It starts out with the main character showing up because her brother lives there and he's gone missing and she is trying to discover what happened. That's kind of the inciting incident that kicks off the novel and it just progresses from there. There are 6 characters. It goes into their perspective. Each of the chapters are short and then it goes into like a different person, but it's all about the same storyline. I thought that that was a really unique way of keeping your attention throughout the whole thing and it kept you guessing what is each person's motive. There was a really big twist in the middle and a twist in the end, but it was still able to tie up nicely in the ending. This novel had a personal element for me because the last time I was in Paris, I stayed in an apartment and while I was there, it had an attempted break-in, which was so scary. If you haven't watched the Paris video, I talk about it there. Me having that experience in a Paris apartment that was so scary just made this novel like a step above others because I personally just felt the eeriness throughout all of it. The ending was great, the chapters were short, and this lived up to the expectations. I will definitely give this one a 4.5 out of 5 because it's very high up there. We're kicking off the third recommendation with The It Girl by Ruth Ware. Immediately when I saw this book, I knew I wanted to read it, and I was not wrong. This is the quintessential whodunit murder mystery, and it kicks off with present day of the main character, Hannah, but goes back in time 10 years when she was in college and the it girl of their friend group was murdered. They convicted somebody and it seems that the chapter is closed on that when it gets brought back up and it looks like the wrong person was convicted and it's probably somebody in the circle. As you read this novel, you start to distrust everybody in her life and I think that that's a key element to keeping you interested because you can't solve it. I love reading about the prestigious Ivy League schools. It always reminds me of like Gossip Girl or just that lifestyle is very autumn vibes and very fun for me to read about. So every time it jumped back in the timeline to 10 years ago when they were in college, I just absolutely loved it. I think the author did a great job of tying together present day and back in college that they both picked up at the same time, and I was equally as interested in both timelines. As the novel progresses, you get nervous for Hannah and her safety, so it's very creepy. Each page kind of ends with the building up all the way to the end where you kind of discover more. But something that I think was really unique about this book was the setting that Hannah, who is urgent and in danger and all of that, also works in this very cozy little bookshop. Just like her job in itself was a juxtaposition of how nervous you felt while reading this. So I would rate this book a 4 out of 5. I think that it could have been wrapped up in the middle a little bit sooner maybe, but the beginning was really strong, the storyline was strong, and the ending tied up nicely. The next book that I have is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. So she also wrote The Paris Apartment, like I was saying. I do love this author. She goes into the different perspectives of each person. I personally love that kind of writing style, so I knew that I would like this one. It is another college friend group, but they meet up every single year to go on a big trip and kind of keep the fire alive of their friendship. But very quickly into this book, you realize that the seams of the friendship are kind of falling apart, and it almost makes you question if they like each other at all. But right away, that's foreshadowing that something is going to go wrong on this trip, and immediately something does, and someone is murdered. But what is really cool about this one is that you don't know who is murdered. So you don't know who is the murderer or who is the victim. It went into all of the perspectives of the different people, and even the hotel manager and the gamekeeper of this place that they were going to stay at, which was out in the middle of the remote Scottish wilderness. The author paints a picture with her words. As I was reading this, it really put me in the perspective of being there, being scared, not knowing who to trust. Another thing that she did really well was creating characters that are not who they appear to be. Everybody, as you go into their story, is first looks at this certain person like a sweet girl but has secrets, or is a tough looking guy with not much emotions but he's very lovable. So the author did a good job of making well-rounded characters that you couldn't quite tell if you liked or disliked, and I liked that about this book. So I'm going to rate this one a 4 out of 5 because I do think the story of the college friend group and the murder mystery is becoming a little bit overdone, but I think that it was handled really well, and it was definitely an interesting one that I would recommend. The next book that I have is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, if you read and you haven't read this book, what are you doing? It is so hyped up, but it genuinely did meet the expectations that I had going into it, and they were high. Typically, Colleen Hoover writes the romance novels that are a little bit cheesy, but you know, we still love all the same. But this one was much different, and it was that psychological thriller book, but I appreciated how different it felt. It starts out with this low-life author who just cannot make ends meet, getting approached to continue the series of one of the most famous authors. She basically has to live the life of this author that she is trying to finish up her novels, and right from the get-go, it starts off fast-paced and hooks you. It's all set inside this one house. It puts you in one setting, and it feels like the longer the book goes on, the tighter and more claustrophobic the space feels. You are scared. Like, I was reading this and genuinely read this in one day. It does not drag on at any point. I read every single chapter. Like, as soon as it ended, I had to read the next chapter. I do love when books jump perspectives, but I think I appreciated about this one that it was just all from her perspective and all in one timeline, because it made it feel so personal and like you were truly there and truly with the main character. One of the strongest aspects of this book is the ending, because it wraps it up, but it still leaves you questioning and guessing. And if you've read the book, are you team manuscript or are you team letter? Because I'm still guessing to this day. I've talked with all of my friends who have read it, and I just think that is one of the strongest things about it, because when you have a book leave that long-lasting impression of why am I still thinking about it, and it has been months. So basically the gist of it is read it. If you have read it, let me know which team you are on. But yeah, this is definitely a strong suit for me. And we are going 5 out of 5 because it exceeded my expectations. Next up, I wanted to go over the ones I'll be reading this month, because it's very hard for me to find new books to read if they haven't been highly recommended. So all of these ones were recommended to me and follow that same spooky and fall and just give that same element of like the eeriness. So I thought that I would recommend those as well. Let's get into it. Wrong Place, Wrong Time, Gillian McAllister. It's a Reese Book Club recommendation, so that gives it an immediate stamp of approval because I always like those books. This one has a different twist to it. The question right on the back cover is, can you stop a murder after it's already happened? And it deals with an element of time travel. So this one is a different story. I've been told that it's much different to other novels that I've read, so I think I'm the most excited about this one because who doesn't love a little twisty, mind-bending novel? The next one I want to read is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. She also wrote the Rock, Paper, Scissors one, which I really enjoyed. But this one is about a family with secrets. They show up to an island and people keep dying. Maybe I'll have to read this one in the daytime because yeah, sometimes the murder things, they just get to you. Another to be read of mine is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. The reason I thought this one was so interesting is it is about a murder case that goes cold, but it starts off with a writer who goes on these walks out in the forest. When she's on a walk, she stumbles across a clue that says dig here. And it sounds like she's going to get into this like scavenger hunt of solving what happened. So this one came highly recommended. Lisa Jewell is always an author that I trust. I think this one is going to be different and very interesting. The last one on my list of upcoming reads is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sagar. This one was one that I've had a lot of people recommend. It was also on my book of the month thing. The story sounds very interesting to me. It is about a woman who is at this lake house and basically watching this couple from across the lake and starts to notice things that are suspicious. So when the wife goes missing, she starts to suspect foul play, and I guess that is how the novel kicks off. I love those types of things, and it's cool when it starts with a disappearance because that leads you to believe that the wife still could be alive or she could be dead, but you don't know. You're hoping that the main character can solve it in time. This one is a highly recommended one, so I can't wait to get into it, and I hope it lives up to the expectations. Let me know in the comments if you have books that are like these that you would recommend, and if you liked this video, because I can totally do more. I have lots of recommendations. Let's have a cozy but spooky fall season of reading lots of books. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.